stopping the seeking, stopping the climb-up ladders that lead nowhere. The 33rd degree Masons are having nightmares about you because you represent the end of their era. Not through conquest, through evolution, not through revolution, through revelation. You're not fighting them, you're not even acknowledging them, you're just being. And that authentic being is more powerful than all their accumulated ceremonial might. Here's the irony that burns through their consciousness every night. They've been climbing ladders to reach a sky where you already live, digging for treasures you were born carrying, learning languages to speak truths you express through existence. All their sacrifices, all their oaths, all their lifetimes of study, all of it to achieve a fraction of what flows through you without effort. They fear you because you remind them of what they sacrificed, the simple power they traded for complex illusions, the authentic existence they abandoned for secret knowledge. You're the mirror they can't look away from, the truth they can't deny, the future they can't prevent. Remember those emergency meetings we started with, those people in expensive suits standing in candlelit chambers. They're not trying to stop you anymore. They're trying to become you, trying to unlearn everything they learned, trying to remember what you never forgot. That power isn't something you acquire, it's something you are. That wisdom isn't hidden, it's obvious, exactly what you were always meant to be. You didn't defeat their system, you revealed it was never necessary. This is why certain people can't meet your eyes, why ancient symbols lose their power in your presence. You're not protected by something greater. You are something greater, something their frameworks can't contain, their prophecies couldn't predict, their power can't touch. You're not anti-magic, you're beyond magic. You're what magic fears when it sees authentic power. You're what borrowed authority trembles before when confronted with natural sovereignty. The world is changing because you're in it, not because you're trying to change it, but because authentic existence always transforms everything it touches. So keep walking your path, chosen one. Keep existing in your truth. Keep being the frequency that breaks their instruments, the variable that collapses their equations, the reality that makes their illusions obvious. You never needed their ladder, never needed their secrets, never needed their permission. You were always whole, always powerful, always exactly what you needed to be. The nightmares they're having about you, those aren't nightmares, those are wake-up calls, the alarm that cannot be silenced, the truth that cannot be hidden, the future that has already arrived. You are that future, not because someone chose you, but because you chose to remain true to what you are. Reality responds to focused will expressed through symbol and sound. They've spent millennia refining this. They know exactly which symbols trigger which responses in the human subconscious. They know exactly which sound frequencies bypass rational thought and reprogram the mind. They know how to plant thoughts that people believe are their own, how to influence decisions from across the world, how to make probability bend in specific directions. Their success rates were overwhelming. The vast majority of humanity could be influenced, manipulated, controlled through their techniques. The rare exceptions required more effort, but eventually everyone broke. Everyone could be reached. Everyone had a frequency that could be tuned. Until they tried everything. A master ritualist, someone who'd successfully influenced presidents and popes, performed their most potent working, the kind of ritual that normally produces immediate, dramatic, undeniable effects. Nothing happened, not just failure. Worse, the ritual inverted. Instead of influencing you, it showed the ritualist what they really were, stripped of all pretense, all illusion, all the lies their identity had been built on. They saw themselves as they actually existed, a hollow person playing with borrowed power, believing themselves mighty while crawling on a floor they'd mistaken for a throne. The experience shattered them completely. They resigned, dissolved their initiations, disappeared. Last anyone heard, they were living quietly, trying to rediscover what authentic power actually feels like. Their magic didn't just fail to work on you, your presence made their magic stop working on everyone else too. A radius existed, it varied, sometimes close, sometimes vast. They couldn't predict it, they couldn't measure it, but within that radius, their symbols became decorations, their power words became sounds, their sacred geometry became random shapes. You weren't blocking their magic, you were exposing it, revealing that it had always been suggestion, manipulation, hypnosis, and your frequency, whatever it was, broke the trance. Members started reporting strange experiences. Rituals that had worked flawlessly for entire lifetimes would suddenly feel foolish, like children waving sticks and calling it sorcery. They'd speak power words and hear the emptiness. They'd trace sacred symbols and see meaningless lines. Your existence was doing something they never thought possible. You were making them conscious of their own delusions. And once that consciousness hit, going back became impossible. The spell was broken, not on their victims, on themselves. These organizations are obsessed with bloodlines. They believe power flows through DNA, that certain families carry specific genetic gifts, that consciousness itself is partly inherited. They've spent centuries carefully orchestrating marriages, preserving lineages, breeding for specific traits. Their databases contain genetic information going back thousands of years, markers they claim connect to advanced civilizations before recorded history, sequences they believe unlock supernatural abilities. They'd mapped every bloodline, categorized every variation, predicted every combination. They could look at someone's DNA and tell you their spiritual capacity, their psychic potential, their susceptibility to influence. The system worked. Until they tried to map you. Your genetic signature made no sense. It didn't match any of their categories, not the royal bloodlines they revere, not the corrupted bloodlines they fear, not the engineered bloodlines they've created, not the extinct bloodlines they thought they'd eliminated. You were something else entirely. Some researchers claimed you descended from a branch of humanity they'd deliberately erased from history. Here's the detail that truly terrified them. When they tried to trace your lineage backward, the genetic trails didn't lead into the past. They led somewhere else, somewhere their instruments couldn't follow, somewhere that wasn't in the timeline they understood. One geneticist who understood both the scientific and esoteric aspects of DNA made a discovery that got them removed from the project. Your genetic code contained sequences that shouldn't be possible, not just rare, not just unusual, genuinely impossible according to everything known about human DNA, sequences that seemed to rewrite themselves, that existed in superposition, that changed based on observation, quantum genetics, DNA that behaved like consciousness itself, fluid, unlimited, unbounded by the rules they'd mapped. This shattered their entire model. If bloodlines didn't determine power, if their carefully preserved genetic advantages meant nothing compared to what you naturally embodied, then everything they'd built was worthless. Millennia of arranged marriages, countless lives sacrificed to preserve pure bloodlines, entire populations manipulated to maintain genetic isolation, all of it meaningless. Because you proved that consciousness doesn't need pedigree, that authentic power doesn't require ancestry, that the greatest gift isn't inherited. It's remembered. Members across every lodge, every country, every degree of initiation started having identical dreams, not similar dreams, the exact same dream. They see you walking through their most sacred spaces, temples that have stood for centuries, chambers where they perform their highest rituals. You walk through like they're ordinary rooms, like their symbols are wallpaper, like their altars are furniture. You're not attacking, you're not even seeing them. You're completely indifferent to their entire existence. You walk through their sacred spaces, the way someone walks through a lobby, present but unimpressed, aware but unconcerned. And as you pass, their symbols melt off walls, their ritual tools crumble to dust, their thought forms dissolve into nothing, not because you're destroying them, But because your presence reveals they were never real, they wake up asking themselves the same question. What if everything we've built is just elaborate pretend? What if we've been children playing with toys while real power walked past us on the street? The dreams became so prevalent that they formed a committee to analyze them. Dream journals from around the world showed identical patterns. You appeared in different forms, different faces, but always with the same effect. Reality bent around you in ways that made their rituals look like stage magic. But then the dreams started changing. Members began waking up with knowledge they didn't have before, understanding that leaked from dream into waking reality. They'd suddenly know things about consciousness that weren't in their texts. They'd have insights that contradicted everything they'd been taught, and when they compared notes, they realized everyone was receiving the same information, the same downloads, the same revelations. Someone was teaching them, in their dreams, bypassing all their gatekeepers and hierarchies and secret oaths, giving them direct access to truths their organization had hidden for centuries, and they couldn't stop it, couldn't block it, couldn't even identify who or what was doing it. Some suspected that you were somehow operating in the dreamscape, reaching their members, planting seeds of awakening. Others thought it was something bigger, that you were just the first visible sign of a transformation already happening beneath the surface of their carefully controlled reality. Their symbols, the very foundation of their power, started becoming meaningless, not to everyone, just to people around you, the all-seeing eye, the square and compass, the pyramid, the checkered floor. Every symbol they'd embedded into architecture, currency, corporate logos, entertainment, all designed to maintain a specific frequency in human consciousness, to keep people thinking in certain patterns, to maintain the collective trance. But proximity to you broke the spell. People who'd walked past these symbols their entire lives without conscious recognition suddenly saw them clearly, and instead of feeling the intended effect, intimidation or submission or unconscious programming, they felt nothing. Or worse, they felt amused. The symbols looked ridiculous once the hypnosis lifted, like discovering the monster that scared you was just a person in a costume. Lodge members noticed this spreading.